When we talk about the term NIL in college athletics, it conjures all kinds of images in people's minds, as well as elicits all kinds of emotions as well. We're going to talk about some of the positives and the negatives of the NIL sphere based on 3 stories I read in the past week and how it impacts BYU and college athletics overall, and talk about a new commitment for Kalani Sitake and the BYU football program.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who are everydayers, we like to say right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and as such, this is your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU sports. All right, let's launch right in on today's show and talk about NIL. Now, for those of you out there in Cougar Nation, I'm sure there are some of you who are all in favor of athletes cashing in on their name, image, and likeness. And I, for one, I completely say that I am behind the athletes benefiting from their NIL. I absolutely think that they should have been cashing in for years. But the bigger point to be made here is that I'm wondering if the ultimate regulation is probably the best term of the NIL sphere and the NIL market may come from within. And what do I mean by that? It's an interesting dynamic at play here because, as you probably saw yesterday, a former Utah State Aggie and great Osabor, he is headed to the University of Washington to rejoin his former head coach, Danny Sprinkle, with the Huskies. And he's going to do it on a contract that is guaranteeing him somewhere around $2 million, if not more than $2 million. It is believed, based on what I read, to be among, if not the richest NIL deal in the country for a college basketball player. Now, does it pale in comparison to what certain other professional athletes are making? Yes, you can look no further than yesterday. Jared Goff from the Detroit Lions, a former Cal Bear himself, getting a $212 million contract across 4 years, north of 50 some odd million dollars for him annually. It's peanuts to it's apples to oranges comparison wise, but $2 million is unprecedented in college basketball because not only just 5 years ago, this would have been an impermissible benefit, and the University of Washington absolutely could have found themselves in purgatory with regards to the NCAA. I'm not saying it's not been happening because I can tell you from firsthand knowledge going back as far as 10 years that I have had multiple people involved in college basketball in particular tell me that what NIL is today, where it brings these payments above board, were going on all over the country. And you had to play ball, just do it under the table. That was what it was. It's now all above board. But the bigger point to be made here, as I said, is the regulation going to come in the form of the players and the coaches and the administrators involved in the NIL sphere? I know a lot of people out there believe that the United States Congress is going to have to act, or the NCAA is going to have to or get off the pot and figure out what they're going to do. Here's the deal about the NCAA. It is a complete farce. They perpetuated the farce of amateurism for decades, knowing full well that they were operating in a professional sports market out there across multiple sports. So the NCAA is not going to do anything. And oh, by the way, they are still pursuing getting an antitrust exemption from the United States Congress that would absolve them of the various litigation that is ongoing with regards to their ineptitude as an organization. That tells you everything you know about the NCAA. So that brings me to the key individuals and or parties involved in the NIL sphere. And I speak more of players and coaches. Great Osabor, good on you, sir. I'm just saying that right now. I cannot commend you enough for cashing in on your NIL and getting as much money as you are deemed worth from the University of Washington. The interesting dynamic is there are 2 coaches in the SEC, which is considered to be the big bad you-know-what of college sports, is considered to be the chief reason why we have NIL. They were essentially having bagmen throwing money around when it was under the table and below board. But the interesting part is you have coaches like Hugh Freeze from the Auburn Tigers saying this. He's talking about his quarterback position in particular. Peyton Thorne is expected to be a starting quarterback this year. I believe in our quarterback room, Freeze said on the McElroy and Kublik in the morning show down in SEC country. I believe it's in Birmingham, Alabama. He says, I believe in quarterbacks coach Kent Austin. I believe you have to have the right pieces around Peyton and we can have success. I think you saw some glimpses of that. I don't think we had a total package around him really. Then he adds this. The options that you're presented with, develop Peyton, develop Holden, who is his backup quarterback, develop Hank and develop Walker, his other backup quarterbacks, or go spend $1 million on this guy. Speaking of generally of another guy to bring in via the transfer portal. I couldn't bring myself to doing that because I want to put all the pieces together. Now, I'm not saying I won't do that in time, but just currently, I think the guy is proven. I've watched his Michigan State film 1,000 times. When he had 2 NFL receivers there, he was pretty dang good. So, Hugh Freeze is not ruling out paying $1 million, which is considered to be the going rate for a high-level power 4 type quarterback in the transfer portal market. He's just not willing to go to that level quite yet. Now, you have Brian Kelly from LSU. And let me be very clear about these two individuals, speaking of Hugh Freeze and Brian Kelly. There is a bit of a hypocritical nature to them talking about not being willing to spend X amount of dollars on an athlete when these two dudes are on tens of $1 million long contracts. I think it was Kelly's north of $80 million all told from LSU. So, yes, there's a bit of a hypocritical nature to this. But he says this. Talking about in terms of avoiding players to join the program. It hasn't fared very well, quite frankly, because we're selling something a little bit different, Kelly said via WAFB. That is, we want to recruit. We want to engage, build relationships. We want to develop, retain, and have success. We're not in the market of buying players. Unfortunately, right now, that's what some guys are looking for. They want to be bought, unquote. Okay, Brian Kelly, dude. You've been playing the game as long as anybody out there. You are a veteran coach. You worked at Notre Dame. You're now working at LSU. You have worked in circles that I know I would just based on the conversations I have, and I'm a peon relative to Brian Kelly and or Hugh Freeze. For them to be claiming especially in the case of Kelly, that we want to recruit, we want to buy guys. Coach, come on now. I know that LSU has built-in recruiting advantages. They can absolutely mine the Southeastern Conference and that Southeastern portion of the country for talent to bring in. But let's be real. You're paying guys as much as anybody. And that's the thing about this with this NIL sphere is I don't think that there is any perfect solution to it, but maybe, just maybe, and let me also add this, if there is a truthful bone in Brian Kelly's statement there, if he is being sincere about that, I applaud him. I just don't believe him. I would like to see NIL regulated. I'd like to see it brought in-house from these universities where they can essentially help regulate the market and help their athletes avoid some of the pitfalls that have beset some of these athletes in the early days of NIL. I think BYU has done it the right way, trying to build it the right way, giving their athletes more than just straight up cash money to come play or stay at BYU to play their sports. They're also offering mentoring. They're offering mental health counseling along with a bevy of other things that are built in to what they're doing with the Royal Blue Collective and the like. And I can appreciate what BYU is doing, but I think it's going to take coaches like Brian Kelly. Like I said, if Kelly is sincere in what he's saying, that we want to recruit because we're selling something a little bit different, I think that BYU absolutely is selling something a little bit different. But if these coaches and Hugh Freeze saying he's not willing to go to $1 million for a quarterback quite yet, if that's the truth, and they can get their other fellow coaches on board to essentially regulate the market themselves, that I think would cure some of the ills that NIL is having on college fandom out there. Is it ever going to be the genie's going to be put back in the bottle and we're going to go back to acting like amateurism is the highest ideal of college athletics? No, that's never going to happen. But I believe that NIL is beneficial for the athletes and should continue, but it cannot be completely unregulated, be this wild, wild west format out there like it has been since the day it was announced and approved by the NCAA. They essentially said, hey, it's approved. We're washing our hands of it. You guys figure it out at the university level. Oh, by the way, universities, you can't be involved directly. And then a few months later saying, well, universities can help direct some things. Oh, and then universities can essentially have a preferred collective they can endorse. And now the latest rumors are that eventually it's going to become all in-house for these universities to control the NIL market. It continues to change. The goalposts continue to move, and spare me with regards to the NCAA pulling their heads out of the where the sun don't shine and figuring it out on their own. It may take an act of Congress to ultimately rein it in and get it to where it is a sustainable model. But here's the deal. I don't want the United States Congress involved in college football more than I want them involved in many things in my life, and that's very few things, quite frankly, in my everyday life, as much as they already do. So it is my sincere hope that Brian Kelly, Hugh Freeze, their comments can be taken at face value, and maybe, just maybe, they and their fellow coaching compatriots can figure things out and regulate this themselves. It'd be beneficial to a program like BYU to have some set ground rules where they can compete on a level playing field with their fellow Big 12 mates or Power 4 conference mates out there in the NIL sphere. Right now, it's an absolutely tilted deck, and whoever has the most money, well, more often than not, they're going to win. And congratulations to Great Osibor. Once again, I cannot fault the young man for cashing in on how things are right now. But I hope, I sincerely hope at some point that we can figure out what exactly is going to essentially, what the market will bear. And that will, I think, rule the day. But I hope it comes from within. If it comes from outside, like I said, the United States Congress, et cetera, being forced to legislate on it and to force change that way, I just don't see it being a perfect system. And oh, by the way, it'll be taken advantage of, and it will continue to be taken advantage of. I will freely acknowledge that. But so I just thank you for bearing with me as I try and kind of just hash out what exactly is going on in the NIL sphere. Is there a perfect solution for all this? Absolutely not. And I don't believe that there ever will be a completely perfect solution, but having essentially a framework or at least some ground rules of how things are supposed to be conducted in the NIL sphere, maybe essentially a regulation of the market itself, that I think is the best case scenario. But it's going to take, like I said, I think it has to come from within. The coaches, the administrators, and maybe even the athletes themselves are going to have to come to some sort of an agreement and or compromise to get things figured out. And while I continue to hold my breath and hope it's going to happen, I'm probably going to suffocate because it just doesn't feel like it's going that way. But a guy can hope. Let's just put it that way. All right, we will come back on the other side. We're going to talk about a new commitment to the BYU football program. Kelepi Vete, what he brings to BYU as he comes from Oakland, California to Provo, and could he be coming with a twin brother of his? We'll talk about all that coming up next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is here for you guys to help you hire. When you're hiring for small business, you want to be able to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you guys need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team and do it faster and for free. Think about that. It's a win-win all the way around if you can have that happen. The best part is on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of their job posting on LinkedIn. Hire professionals like a professional and do it with our friends on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing many hats and might not have the adequate time or resources to hire. I can tell you that they are constantly finding new ways to make the process easier. They even launched a feature not too long ago that helps you write your job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker and getting you on to the other tasks you have throughout your day as a small business owner. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for their hiring needs. Why aren't you? I want to encourage you guys to go to post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Once again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. And of course, terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Want to remind you guys, if you're watching ESPN or Fox Sports, sick of all the yelling going on those networks as they quote-unquote embrace debate, I want to encourage you guys to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you all the biggest stories without all the screaming going on the other networks. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's talk about a new commitment to the BYU football program. And this is one that I'm excited for. Kelepi Vete announced his commitment to BYU late last night. I think it was around like 9:20, 9:30 when I saw it. Luckily, I was up late enough that I had some other things I had to do, so I was able to get this into today's show. But by the way, if I'm butchering Kelepi's name, feel free to roast me in the comments. Just let me know how I'm supposed to pronounce it correctly. But I believe it's Kelepi Vete. And if I'm wrong about that, please, like I said, let me know. The one thing about Kelepi is he absolutely brings, I think, an edge to him to BYU. Listed at 6'5", 255 pounds, based on what I was reading about his bio. This is a young man that is a lean, mean, fighting machine, is to use that expression. And the thing about it is, Jeff Hansen wrote at Cougar Sports Insider, the projections are that he's going to play defensive tackle at the Power 4 level. And I'll tell you, watching his huddle highlights, and I watched him, I'd watched him a while back when he initially was offered by BYU and he was going to come on an official visit, which is slated, last I heard, for June. That he tweeted as much. He said June 20th through the 23rd, I think, is what his official visit had been set for. But he decided to pull the trigger and commit to BYU. And at 6'5", 250 pounds, the projection is to play defensive tackle. I love guys like this who have these outsized frames, but have not filled them out. And why do I like that? Well, the thing is that Kelepi is an absolute mauler at 6'5", 250, and he's going to come into BYU, work with BYU strength and conditioning, work with the nutrition team, and all the other individuals involved with the training side of things. And he's going to pack on another 50 pounds easily of muscle. And he's going to be a chiseled specimen, it feels like, when all is said and done. I actually love when young men like this, like I said, who have a 6'5" frame that you can tell is far from being filled out, can come in and put that weight on. And it's, I think, going to benefit a guy like Kelepi. I think that he has got the capability of being a standout defensive tackle at the next level, because you watch him play, and his pad level in particular is very admirable for a guy at the college level. Excuse me, not college level. He's coming to the college level. At the high school level, that is much taller, if not taller, than almost every opponent he probably is going to face on a weekly basis at the high school level. It's not easy to learn a good pad level leverage when you're 6'5" and you're already in incredible shape and you're probably as strong as anybody on the field. You can essentially kind of throw your weight around and control things that way. But watching Kelepi's film, he has been trained very, very well, that even though he may be the best, one of the best athletes on the field at all times when he's playing out there at Oakland, he has got an ability to still can maintain pad level and leverage that makes him even more dynamic and talented as a defensive lineman. Now, could this be a package deal for BYU? Because his twin brother, I believe they are twin brothers, Siosiua Vete, is currently committed to Stanford as an offensive lineman. Now, Siosiua is standing 6'6" and weighs 280 pounds, and he's a higher rated athlete than Kelepi. Kelepi is rated an 85 on the 24/7 sports ranking system. His composite rating is 84.17, so it's a mid 3-star rating for Kelepi. We'll see if he gets a bump in the near future as they go back and reevaluate him. Whereas his brother Siosiua is rated an 87, so he's a higher end 3-star talent, bordering on 4-star talent, and his composite rating is sitting right in that same realm, 86.83. So I look at this, and if a guy like Kelepi can get in his brother's ear, because Siosiua has been committed to Stanford since last August, so he's been locked in with the Cardinal for quite some time. I'd love to see Kelepi work on his brother and say, hey, let's go over to BYU and do things right, and let's go and show them what we're capable of. The other thing I love about a guy like Kelepi committing to BYU is Northern California is becoming a little bit of a pipeline here for BYU getting talent out of the Bay Area. And that's a market that BYU has had moments where they've brought guys in from the Bay Area, but it's becoming more and more common, and I absolutely love it. The fact that BYU is tapping into that market. Get into California and recruit in the backyard of Cal, Stanford, and the like, and steal some of those athletes away. They are talented guys. Like I said, I look at Kelepi's film, and I look at a future star defensive tackle for BYU if he can, like I said, put on the requisite weight. But with his frame, it just seems like a matter of time. It's like if, not when, that weight is going to come. And as he works out with BYU strength and conditioning staff, they will make sure that they have him bulked up and ready to go when the time comes. He's obviously a member of the 2025 recruiting class, and we'll see how things continue to shape up. But it is my hope that Kelepi, after his commitment to BYU, gives his brother something to think about. You don't lock in with Stanford for as long as Siosiua has been locked in with them without probably some very strong feelings about what you can do at Stanford. The education at Stanford is absolutely exceptional. We all know that, and it'd be closer to home for a guy like Siosiua, obviously going to Palo Alto from Oakland versus going from Palo Alto to Provo, from Oakland to Provo. But his twin brother, Kelepi, has decided that Provo is where he wants to be. And I would hope that Kelepi can essentially tell his brother, hey, come on, man. you know what, you want to play with me? Let's go do our thing in Provo, and let's see what we can lead BYU to. The other thing about this is if you're BYU, I'd be pitching Siosiua saying, do you really want to travel clear across the country for more than half of your conference games in the ACC? The fact that Stanford is playing in a conference that is called the Atlantic Coast Conference is just bizarre, but it's just a sign of the times when it comes to conference realignment. The fact that the Bay Area schools on the West Coast, right on the waters of the Pacific Ocean, are playing in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Just it's bizarre. It will never make sense in my head, but alas, that's where things stand right now. And regardless, getting back to the point, I love the fact that Kelepi's going to come to BYU, be able to fill out that frame, and I think that he's going to be an absolute star for the Cougars if he continues to develop the way that he has developed at the high school level. Like I said, he's probably one of, if not the most talented guys when he gets out on the field every week, but you can tell the way that he has been trained, the way he plays the game. He respects it, he works hard, and he is working on the fundamentals, which is a big, big part of being a talented but also productive player at the next level. And I think it's going to translate over as he joins the Kalani Sitake and the BYU football program. And I'll also add this, Sione Po'uha, I think that he's going to be an absolute home run to bring a guy like Kelepi in and say, have Sione say, okay, I'm going to transform you and make it into what I believe you can be. That's a really, really nice guy to have training these guys because let's be honest, Sione has done it all at the collegiate level, an All-American in college, albeit at Utah, then goes on and has a very, very strong career in the NFL. He has played at the highest levels of football, and he can translate that and coach these guys up, and hopefully Kelepi is the next star defensive tackle coming out of the BYU football program. All right, we'll finish up today's show with some thoughts on the situation involving Noah Waterman. He officially entered the NCAA Transfer Portal yesterday. What does that mean for BYU basketball? Why am I so high on other guys potentially replacing him in BYU's lineup? We'll dig into all that next as we round out this edition of Locked On Cougars right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to encourage you, if you have not done so already, please sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a great way to interact with the show, support the show financially, and also get my insider tidbits that I'm passing along to you guys, and it comes to you in the form of a text message on your phone. It doesn't get much more simple than that. The best part is you can respond with a text message of your own, and it pops up in my feed, and we can go back and forth and chat, and it's been a really fun addition to what we're doing here on the podcast, and I'm having a grand time talking with y'all, and hope you guys will continue to sign up for this in mass. 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you. If it's not, so be it. But you have 14 days to see if it's the right option, and just $5 a month afterwards to have access via our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Hit the link in the show notes, whether you're watching and or listening to this. And we'll hope to see you out there on our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, let's talk about Noah Waterman. Now, officially in the NCAA Transfer Portal, that coming out via various Twitter accounts, etc. And I alluded to it yesterday. I was fully expecting him to enter the NCAA Transfer Portal. A couple of you who are close friends, and also some of us on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, said, Jake, you alluded to it. When is it going to happen? And I told you guys, if you remember, that I was essentially kind of couching the comments because it wasn't a sure bet that Noah ultimately was going to enter the transfer portal. This is a guy who's actually, based on the conversation I had with somebody yesterday, that had been hanging on and holding out hope that he was going to be a part of the future for BYU because he had come to enjoy Provo. I'll say this. His first year in Provo, Noah Waterman was a fish out of water, and he admitted as much essentially on this podcast. If you go back into the basketball season, we had an exclusive one-on-one with him, and he talked about the very fact that he struggled when he first got to BYU. But in the past year, he essentially, for whatever reason, made peace with what was happening, and he bought all into the BYU basketball program, and he benefited from it. He had a very strong season, all things considered, last year for BYU, shooting nearly 40% from three, and I think a very strong contributor, starting 33 games last year for the BYU basketball program. The early word was that he was going to stick around BYU. He asserted that to KSL Sports in an interview before Mark Pope ultimately left BYU. But like I said, the conversation I had with one individual yesterday, they said that he had every intention of being one of the guys that was going to stick around in Provo and help build this roster back up. Well, I think circumstances dictated that he look around a little bit, because he probably is looking at the recruiting profile of what BYU is going about. We talked about some of the guys BYU is looking at yesterday. Burke Boyunk Tinsel. I'm gonna that name. If he does pick BYU, speaking of Burke, I am gonna have to train myself on that name for hours to get it right. Boyuk Tunjil. Hopefully I got that one right that time. But nonetheless, he's probably looking at a guy like that, thinking, okay, if that guy's gonna come in here, he's a stretch four. He plays the position I play. Does he come in and steal my spot? Noah Waterman's got 1 season left in his college career, where a guy like Berke has got 3 seasons potentially on that. Now, Berke is being projected as an NBA draft pick as soon as the 2025 NBA draft a year from now, so that could change some things. But a guy like Noah Waterman has got to understand that he's got to look out for himself. He is going to have offers in the NIL sphere. As I understand it, he's already getting attention as of a recording of this podcast in the NIL sphere, and I'm sure there's going to be some pretty healthy offers going to come his way. Could BYU match those or at least make it competitive? I absolutely believe they could, because based on how I understand BYU's operating with NIL, they are making sure that their athletes are taken care of, but to a level. If some program out there believes they need a 3-point shooting big man, a 6'11" wing like a Noah Waterman, well, they can make an offer that simply BYU is like, you know what, we're going to balk at that number and we wish you well, Noah. But the bigger point is, I think Noah's looking out for himself. He looks at what Kevin Young's doing with the roster, and he's trying to make sure that he is in the best position he can find for himself. And what that is he doesn't want to be supplanted in the starting lineup or see himself relegated to a reserve role in his final season as a college basketball player. He's a well-traveled player, having played at Niagara, Detroit Mercy, and now at BYU. And could it potentially be 4 teams in 6 college seasons? That very well could be the case. But I can ultimately understand why a guy like Noah Waterman wants to examine all of his options out there. And frankly, I would encourage him to do just that. I've said it once on this podcast. I'll say it again. I believe that most athletes, if not all of them, should enter the NCAA Transfer Portal on an annual basis and get a feel for what their overall worth is on the open market. If you have no intention, even if they have no intention of leaving the program they're at, you should still at times be understanding of what you're worth on the NIL sphere. And we talked about it earlier on today's show. NIL conjures up all kinds of and elicits all kinds of emotion for college fans. Some believe it's ruining the sport that they have come to love and the teams that they love to cheer for. They believe it's a mercenary thing now in college athletics. It very well may be that, but the bigger point is these athletes, they're trying to find the best situation for themselves. And a guy like Noah Waterman, the way he is playing basketball, I believe he's got aspirations of playing at the professional level. Well, if he were to come in, let's say BYU does land a guy like Berke Boyunk Tunchol to add to their roster. Let's say that Berke comes in and beats him out for that starting position in BYU's lineup, and all of a sudden Noah Waterman is coming off the bench. Well, he's going to have professional scouts, whether they're overseas or stateside, who are going to say, okay, you know what? This guy got beat out by a younger player. Maybe we should write him off ourselves. He wants to find an opportunity for himself to assert himself and also enjoy a big senior season. There's no reason it can't happen at BYU. Let me be very clear about that. And a couple of you I saw on social media, as well as a couple of you just asking me questions, made me feel like maybe I was not necessarily as clear as I should be. I don't necessarily want to see Noah Waterman leave BYU. I just believe guys like Berke, if they are the same caliber player, the old adage is if you have 2 players of similar caliber, you go with the younger player because they have longer to develop and more often than not, hopefully higher upside. And that's what Berke, I believe, has in spades. But I also understand that Noah Waterman has been a very, very strong piece for BYU over the past season, would absolutely be a guy that I think can be counted on to bring a veteran presence to this BYU basketball program with a rookie head coach in Kevin Young and a new staff. So there are positives and negatives on both sides of it. So hopefully I can clarify that a little bit, but we'll see what happens with Noah's recruitment when it comes to the NIL. Does he ultimately take the biggest offer out there? Because I can tell you, based on what I understand, neither Dallin Hall or Richie Saunders ultimately took the biggest bag they could get. They're getting healthy bags, speaking of money, from BYU and the Royal Blue Collective, etc., to make sure that they stay put in Provo, but they did not ultimately chase the almighty dollar. There are a lot of athletes out there who absolutely will do that, and we'll see what Noah Waterman opts to do. Will he go for the biggest number he can get on the NIL market, or will he ultimately decide, you know what, BYU is where I've kind of established myself. They will still take care of me healthily. They'll still take care of me financially in a healthy manner, and at the same time, I can be at a place that I've come to be comfortable in and continue to do my thing. It's an interesting dynamic, but as we talked about earlier on today's show, NIL is affecting all facets of college sports, and it's good, it's bad, and it's everywhere in between. It feels like all at the same time. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Let me know your feedback. I always appreciate all of your feedback, good, positive, and different. Whatever you got for us, drop us notes in the show notes. Let us know what you think. Comment on it. Like, rate, review, share it with your family and friends, and continue to help us build this audience right here on the podcast. Once again, thank you for making it your first listen of the day, as you like to say. And also, thank you to all of you who are everydayers as well. And until tomorrow, my friends, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.